Back in November, I did a video with the Nissan Ariya with the small battery, and shortly after I uploaded that video, I was approached by a local car dealer with a somehow tempting offer. Now this is the Evolve version, the full spec Nissan Ariya. It's the two-wheel drive with the large battery, actually the car that I would recommend you to buy. When you buy an Evolve version, Nissan has ticked all the boxes. There's all the extras you can dream of. Well, you can go for another color. You can go from these 19-inch wheels up to 20-inch wheels, and then you can put some artificial leather inside. But that's basically it. You can actually also save quite a large amount of money by going down to the advanced model, but I think you should check out Nissan's website and see what kind of extra features you like in a car, and then go for that if a Nissan Ariya is something for you. Well, the Nissan Ariya is available in 2 battery sizes and with either front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. Within the 2 battery sizes, you can choose the small battery size, which is 66 kilowatt hours total capacity, 63 kilowatt hours net capacity. Actually, I think many people would find that car more than enough for daily commuting. But if you want more, you can go with the battery that's in this car. It's 91 kilowatt hours total capacity and 87 kilowatt hours net capacity. I've told this in some of my other videos. The reason that there is a total capacity and a net capacity is that these kind of EV batteries don't like to be charged up to 100% and not be driven at once, and they also don't like to hit real zero. Therefore, there's a buffer in the top and in the bottom of the battery that you as a driver won't have access to. And this protects the battery and makes it last longer. If you go for the model with the big battery, then you can choose all-wheel drive or you can choose front-wheel drive. This is the front-wheel drive version, and it is the version that I will recommend to go for. And I'll get into that later in the video. This car has 178 kilowatts, that's equivalent to 239 horsepower and 300 Newton meters. And with this battery size, that gives you an WLTP range of 525 kilometers. Actually, if you settle for the advanced version with a little less extras, then you'll actually get up to 533 kilometers WLTP. If you go for the E-Force version, that's the all-wheel drive version, then you'll actually not lose that much range, but unless you need to tow a caravan, I would just save the money. I'll get back to that in a moment. The Nissan Ariya is, as many of the competitors, a crossover or SUV. It's built on the platform called CMF EV. It's the same platform used in a Renault Megane E-Tech Electric. And what does that mean? Well, the platform is typically the battery, it's the suspension system, and it's some collision zones, and it's a lot of cabling. And in this car, what you get is always a front-wheel drive layout, and if it's a Nissan Ariya and not a Renault Megane, you can also get the all-wheel drive version. Otherwise, you always get the battery here in the bottom, gives a low center of gravity. The battery is water cooled and water heated. I'll get back to that a little later in the video. And then you always get the option of 22 kilowatt AC charging, and that's actually pretty cool. AC charging is when you get to the slow charging stations, what I call a destination charger. Many of those chargers are 22 kilowatt chargers, but most cars, if they charge on 3 phases, are only able to charge with 11 kilowatts, at least here in Denmark. But this car, together with the Renault Megane E-Tech Electric, can actually charge at 22 kilowatts if you have the destination charger for yourself. With no other car plugged. Typically there's 2 plugs out on these destination chargers. And that's actually a pretty cool feature, because if you often charge on these destination chargers, you charge at double speed. If we talk DC charging, these cars can charge at 130 kilowatts, and that's up to 130 kilowatts. Actually, that figure is, in my opinion, not very interesting. What's more interesting is the charging curve, and I'll get into that. I'll test that later in this video. Another thing that's worth talking about with the CMF EV platform is that the motors in these cars are not permanent magnet motors as many of the competitors use. These motors are something that Renault and Nissan has developed themselves. They call these motors EESM motors. They should actually be not quite as effective at low speeds, but at motorway speeds, actually these motors would be, well, according to Nissan, they're more effective than permanent magnet motors, which are very effective. And then maybe you ask yourself, what's the difference between a permanent magnet motor and an EESM or an induction motor? Well, the EESM motor is more like an induction motor. The difference is that in an EV motor, there's a rotor and there is a stator. The stator is the housing, and then there's the rotor. It's actually the only moving part in an EV motor. And in a permanent magnet motor, there are permanent magnets that if you cut the power, the motor will lock. And then there's magnets, they're always magnetic, and that will drive the motor very efficient. While the induction motors are coils and copper windings, and when you put power into that, it becomes magnetic. But the EESM motors are more like an induction motor with no permanent magnets. And as I said, according to Nissan, they should be more effective than a permanent magnet motor at high speeds. And in terms of design, I'm not gonna be the judge. Well, you can get a tour right here. At the rear of the car, well, I want to say one thing. This car has, you know, a foot sensor, and it works every time, first time in a Nissan Ariya. That's great. Otherwise, there's a good booth. Well, normally in the EVs, you know, the bottom is a little high, you lose some space, but actually you can put these thing, I don't know what you call that in English. Maybe you can help me in the comment section below. But here, you can open up. There's plenty of room for your charging cable, stuff like that, but you'll also need that because there's no frunk. I'll get back to that in just a moment. And then there's the towing capacity. I just touched the subject a moment ago. This car can only tow 750 kilos, but if you go for the E-Force version, the four-wheel drive version, all-wheel drive version, then it can tow 1,500 kilos. Here inside the car, you at once notice that the materials used in the cabin are of really, really great quality. Well, at least, you know, the feeling you get when you sit here is that the quality is really outstanding. The Evolve version, of course, with the Bose equipment and all kinds of electric features here. Well, you can also open the glove compartment, you know, electric. I could do this all day. I like the way that they incorporated all the buttons, you know, in this wooden look stuff. And the screens here, they're pretty nice. And then there's a nice feature. You have double layer glass both in front and rear. This double layered glass helps both for soundproofing but also for insulation of the cabin, so you use less energy to cool or heat up the cabin. And then another thing, you have loads of space around you in the cabin, also here around your legs. But that comes with a price, because all of this space you get here gives a spacious feeling inside the cabin, but the price is that there's no frunk, because the heat pump and all the technical stuff is put out there. But let's talk a little infotainment, because a Renault Megane E-Tech Electric, it actually comes with the Google system Android Automotive which I'm a huge fan of. I actually think it's the best infotainment system in a car besides what you get in a Tesla, which I like just a bit better. And this car builds on the same platform but doesn't use Google Infotainment. It uses Nissan's own system, but however it has Alexa voice command, and I'm not sure, but I think that the maps are Google Maps. So it's a funny, mix of Amazon and Google stuff, I think. You have manual preheat of the battery when you're going to a DC charging station. I'll try that a little later in the video when I'm doing the DC charging test. And then I actually think that the system, it's pretty okay. The screens look good. The navigation has estimated state of charge at arrival to your destination or to a charging station, stuff like that. And you have wireless Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, which works great, no problems there. All in all, I like the system. Well, I could use some physical buttons for the heated seats. I can't find them, but overall, it's pretty good. But I have to say a thing. I participated in a podcast for Continental tires in this week where I had this car, and I used this car to get to Odense where I had to participate in the podcast. But the navigation here estimated that I would arrive with 33% state of charge, and I started out with 89. I actually arrived with 52% state of charge. And sadly, if that kind of system doesn't function as you want it to work, then it's unusable. In the rear of the Nissan Ariya, well, it all just continues. Loads of nice materials. Actually, the panoramic roof in this car can be opened, and as a rear seat passenger, you also have the possibility to enjoy this roof. It's quite spectacular, actually. You have heated seats in the rear also. You have USB-C and normal USB. You have the flat floor here. And I actually forgot to test this in front, but I did it in my Danish video. And try and listen the sound when you close the door. Both in the front and in the rear, when you close the door, it's like closing the door in a really premium product. I've now taken the Nissan Ariya for a ride, and it's for sure a very smooth ride. And also the way the power is delivered. Maybe it's these EESM motors. It's just smooth. It's the least aggressive car I have ever driven. It's just soft and smooth in every way. And actually, if you are in that mindset, and a car like this, it's a family car. I actually like it. Another thing that's pretty special is, the rear view mirror. In the Evolve version, it's always this LCD screen. You can switch it between normal view and this LCD. When you use the LCD screen, you should actually just get used to it, that you can't, just check out how your hair looks. But other than that, it's pretty cool. I'd also like to talk about the driving aids, the assisting systems. They're actually pretty good in this car. My favorites are the ones that you find in the Volkswagen MEB cars, the ID3, ID4, ID5, also Skoda Enyaq and the Audi Q4 e-tron. They work pretty damn good. But these also do. The auto steer is pretty good, and the adaptive cruise control is also pretty good. It keeps a good distance, and you can of course adjust it. But one of those things that I think that the MEB cars do better is the ability to read the traffic signs, and then the car automatically sets the speed of the traffic signs. This car can also do this, but I have only seen it work on the motorway. On normal highway driving, stuff like that, you have to set the speed manually. even though the car can read the sign, it then comes with a suggestion, and then one push of a button and you go to that suggestion. And actually a plus in this car that you don't get in the MEBs is that you can tell it to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 10 kilometers an hour faster than the speed limit says, and then normally the cars always go a little slower than the speedometer actually says. Another thing that's very good on the Evolve version, which is not on the advanced version, is the headlights. These are LED matrix lights, and they work really well with a lot of output. Maybe I would say I'm owning a Skoda Enyaq myself with the all the extras. It's a sport line with everything, and maybe those headlights are 5% better, but these are really excellent already. Another thing that I usually check out in my videos is how the car's recuperation, the regenerative braking works. And in this car you have the e-pedal. That's a Nissan thing. Maybe you know it from the classic Nissan Leaf also. And the Nissan Leaf with the e-pedal, it goes all the way down to a standstill. This doesn't, but when you engage the e-pedal, there's actually loads of recuperation, and that makes you able to drive one pedal drive. But why you can't go all the way down to a standstill, I don't know. It doesn't make sense. Another thing that doesn't make sense is that this car on the gear selector has a D and a B mode that you also know from many other cars. That could be the MEB cars, the ID4 for example. And that's also different levels of recuperation. But when you both have the e-pedal and the D and B mode, I think it's just too much and it doesn't make sense. I also did a DC charging test with the car. And approximately 20 minutes before I entered the charger, I engaged the manual battery heating system which this car has, and I actually like that system a lot. It's a little like the MG4 and that works actually, maybe it's even easier to use than the navigation based systems that you see in a lot of cars at the time. But I used that system, and how that charging session ended up you can see right here. As you could see, a little over 32 minutes from 10 to 80%, which is the charging session that I do in my videos. It's not very impressive. After all, a good car today charges between 25 and 30 minutes from 10 to 80%, but this battery is pretty large, and the charging curve actually is okay. It's just not high enough. I actually didn't peak very much over 110, 115 kilowatts, and that was a bit disappointing. But also it depends how much you DC charge. Things I also test in my videos is how the noise level in the cabin is, and if you close this curtain from the panoramic roof, as I always do, then I measured the noise level in the cabin at 80 kilometers an hour to be 60 decibels. And that's actually very good. It's equivalent to Ioniq 5 and a Skoda Enyaq, which are some of the good cars. The best cars, you're not near that. That's like 55 decibels. That was a Mercedes EQE. But the good mediocre cars, that's an Ioniq 5 and Skoda Enyaq cars like that. And that car is on pair, it does the same. At 130 kilometers an hour, I also tested, and that was a little worse. It made 69 decibels, and there the Ioniq 5 and the Skoda Enyaq, they're at 66, 67. So it's a little louder, but it's overall pretty good and definitely acceptable. I also want to show you an acceleration test I did with the car. I do it at the motorway where I'm allowed to drive 130 kilometers an hour. So I start at the speed ramp, which is not that steep. It's about 1% that road is falling. So that's the place I usually do these acceleration tests, and how it went you can check out right here. 3, 2, 1, go! Meget blød start. I did the acceleration with a state of charge of just 29%. 0 to 80 kilometers an hour, 5.81, 0 to 100, 8.85, and 30 to 130, 10.95. Figures that's very equivalent to a Volkswagen ID.4. A final test I usually do in my videos is that I drive the car on Cobblestone. The reason I do that is because, first of all, the city of Varde, where I live, it's a very old city, middle-age stuff, roads, stuff like that in the city center. And if you drive there, you very quickly find out if there's stuff rattling in the cabin. And I tested that just the other day with this car also. As you could see, as I expected, this car did that perfectly. No rattling at all, everything feels solid built, and the quality impression of this car, I can't state that enough, it's really, really good. This was my 1 week with this 87 kilowatt hour net capacity front wheel driven Nissan Ariya in the Evolve version. A car that I actually like a lot. I would like to, in this conclusion, break it down to 6 points. Point 1 is that this car falls right down in the snake pit of hard competition for SUV crossover EVs. It's up against cars like the Tesla Model Y, Ioniq 5, Kia EV6, Skoda Enyaq ID.4. I could go on. All these cars have qualities, and I think it should be up to you what car that you should choose. Point number 2, this car is the one going below the radar. And that's a big fault, because this is a great EV. I would definitely put it in the mix and consider it. So I think you should do the same. Point number 3, I would go for this version, the front wheel drive, large battery version, and yeah, if you want the Advance or if you want the Evolve, that's up to you, of course. Why wouldn't I go for the all-wheel drive E-Force version? Well, I wouldn't do that because this car's way of driving, it's a cruiser. It's not a performance car. You don't need the extra performance. The only need that could maybe make you think about the all-wheel drive version would be if you have to tow more than 750 kilos. But then some of the competitors already can do that. So yeah, that's again up to your own needs. Point number 4, let's talk consumption. I drove this car to Odense, that's 140 kilometers each way, and on those 280 kilometers I had an average consumption of 235 watt hours per kilometer, which in 2 to 4 degrees Celsius and speeds with around 110, 130 kilometers an hour is actually very good. Maybe a bit better than some of the other cars in the class. Well, maybe the Tesla Model Y can actually be better, but I think that's very, very good, and it gives you a good estimated range of about 370 to 380 kilometers. And this car has a WLTP figure of 525, and at motorway speeds, January, these conditions, I actually think that's pretty good. So maybe there's something about those EESM motors, as Nissan claims, being more effective at high speeds. When I look at our consumption over this week, where there's mainly been short trips, commuting, stuff like that, where the car has been heated up a lot of times, that uses up some energy, the consumption has been 210 to 220 watt hours per kilometer. So again, just below 400 kilometers of range on a full battery. And then there's of course the question, how much range do you have below zero? All these EVs can go below 0% on state of charge. And I would suppose, with my research and what I calculated when I charged the car and also deducted some loss and stuff like that, I think that this car would have at least 30 kilometers of range below zero. Then there's the issue that the estimated state of charge in the navigation, it's not correct. And if that system is not correct, it's not usable, and that's a problem. And Nissan, I would address that you fix that, because it works in a lot of other EVs today. And at last, in the beginning of the video, I said that the version with the small battery would actually be enough, more than enough, for maybe 90% of normal driving. And why am I still saying that this is the version you have to go for? Well, I think it's stupid to drive around with 180 extra kilograms of battery as you have in this car. But on the other hand, those extra money you pay today for the larger battery, you'll get a large amount of that back the day that you sell the car. So yeah, maybe it's just nicer to have the big battery all the time. That's why I suggest that you will go for the big battery front wheel drive version, and then you can decide for yourself if it's the Evolve or Advanced version you want to go for. Thanks for watching my video. If you like my content, I'd be more than happy if you would subscribe on my channel. It's all about EVs, so stick around. See you. Bye.